Long before Spain arrived, the Philippines was already connected to the world. Ancient records from China describe islands overflowing with gold, and Filipino traders sailed across the seas to bring that gold into the heart of Asia. When we think about the Philippines before Spanish colonization, many imagine isolated islands waiting to be discovered. But the truth is very different. Centuries before Spain, the Philippines was already part of a thriving trade network that connected Asia and beyond. And at the center of it all, gold? The Philippines, islands of gold. You know, the Philippines has always been rich in natural resources, and gold was definitely one of its greatest treasures. Ancient miners in Luzon, Bicol, and Mindanao extracted gold from rivers and mountains. By the time foreigners arrived, the islands were already famous for their golden wealth. Archaeologists have uncovered some truly stunning artifacts. Golden masks, necklaces, belts, and ceremonial items, some dating as far back as the 10th century. The craftsmanship is so detailed that, honestly, experts believe Filipino goldsmiths were among the finest in Asia. To neighboring kingdoms, the Philippines wasn't just a forgotten archipelago. It was actually known as a land of gold. One of the strongest pieces of evidence comes from Chinese dynastic records. As early as the Tang dynasty, which was around the 7th to the 10th centuries, Chinese historians wrote about trade with islands to the south, including what is now the Philippines. By the Song and Ming dynasties, those connections grew even stronger. Filipino traders brought gold, pearls, tortoise shells, and wax to Chinese ports. In return, they received silk, porcelain, and ironware. The Chinese described the islands as places where rulers and nobles wore gold jewelry daily, not as luxury, but as a normal part of life. Imagine that, in ancient Manila or Butuan, gold was as common as silverware in Europe. One of the most fascinating discoveries came from Butuan in Mindanao. Archaeologists uncovered golden artifacts in massive boats known as balangay. These boats were large enough to cross open seas and carry tons of cargo. Chinese records confirm this. In the year 1001, the Kingdom of Butuan sent an envoy to the Chinese Imperial court, bringing gifts of gold. This shows that Filipino kingdoms weren't just trading quietly, they were recognized by one of the world's greatest empires. Butuan's king was even given a seal of recognition from the Chinese emperor, proving the Philippines was part of the international stage long before colonization. But Filipino gold may have traveled even farther. Historians suggest that through China and other trade hubs, Philippine gold could have reached India, Arabia, and even parts of Africa. Consider this. Manila and the Visayas sat on one of the busiest maritime routes of the ancient world. Every piece of gold exchanged could have been carried forward, reshaped, and worn by someone thousands of miles away. This makes Filipino gold part of a global story, not locked away in the islands, but shaping the wealth of kingdoms far beyond. By the time Magellan arrived in 1521, Spain already knew of the island's golden reputation. Chroniclers wrote that Filipinos wore golden jewelry, from anklets all the way to crowns. In Cebu, Humabon and his nobles welcomed Magellan wearing golden ornaments. It's no wonder Spain was determined to stay. For them, the Philippines wasn't just about location, it was about resources. And yeah, gold was at the top of that list. One reason Filipino gold stood out was its craftsmanship. Techniques like filigree, granulation, and hammering were so advanced that many artifacts actually rival jewelry from China or India. The famous Surigao Treasure, discovered in 1981, includes golden belts, bowls, and ceremonial ornaments weighing several kilograms. These pieces prove that Filipinos didn't just mine gold, they turned it into art. So why don't most people know this? Well, colonization. When Spain took control, they melted much of the existing gold to fund their empire. Artifacts were lost, resmelted into coins, or shipped to Europe. What remained was hidden underground, forgotten until modern archaeologists unearthed them. This erasure means many Filipinos grew up believing the islands had little wealth before Spain. But the truth is, they had abundance, and they shared it with the world. Today, Filipino gold treasures can be found in museums, from Manila's Ayala Museum to collections abroad. Each piece tells a story of skilled hands, wealthy kingdoms, and thriving trade. Necklaces of twisted gold wire, burial masks hammered with perfect symmetry, ceremonial bowls that gleam even centuries later. These are not the works of primitive people, but of artisans whose craft rivaled the finest jewelers of their time. When you stand before these treasures, you are not just looking at ornaments, you are looking at proof that Filipinos were already part of a sophisticated world long before the word Philippines even existed. And every time we learn about Chinese records mentioning Filipino gold, we remember our ancestors were not isolated. They were traders, artisans, and global participants long before colonizers arrived. Gold from Luzon and Mindanao found its way into temples in China, into markets in Southeast Asia, and perhaps even into the hands of merchants traveling farther still. But the story of this legacy is also bittersweet. Many of these treasures were looted, sold, or carried abroad during the colonial period. Some remain hidden in private collections, separated from the people whose history they embody. And yet, even in foreign museums, they speak. They tell the world that Filipino culture was never small, never provincial. It was connected, innovative, and radiant with wealth. The survival of these artifacts is a triumph in itself. Against centuries of colonization, war, and neglect, the gold still shines. It reminds us that even when stories are suppressed, objects endure. And when we look at them today, we are not just recovering lost history, we are reclaiming dignity. The story of Filipino gold is more than history. It's a reminder that the Philippines has always been valuable. Not because outsiders said so, but because of its own resources and people. While Machu Picchu was still being built, while Europe was still divided into kingdoms, Filipinos were already trading gold across oceans. Our ancestors were shaping treasures fit for kings, and in doing so, shaping their own place in the ancient world. This challenges the old colonial narrative that the islands were discovered or civilized from the outside. The truth is, Filipinos had already built civilizations worth remembering, civilizations whose wealth, artistry, and trade networks stood proudly on their own. So the next time someone asks what the Philippines was before Spain, just tell them this. It was a land where rivers ran with gold, where artisans shaped treasures fit for kings, and where Filipino hands helped shape the wealth of Asia. The Filipino gold that reached ancient China is not just treasure, it is evidence. Evidence that the archipelago was always more than a faraway cluster of islands. Evidence that its people were creators, traders, and visionaries. Evidence that the Filipino story did not begin with conquest, it began with brilliance. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy of all. The gold of the ancestors is not only a reminder of past wealth, it is a mirror, reflecting what Filipinos have always been. Resilient, resourceful, and radiant. A people whose worth has never depended on others, but has always shone from within.